Welcome back to the DungeonSmith. I touched upon in a previous video that one of the things I love the most about D&D are all the great campaign settings and worlds that have been written for it. I've spent countless hours talking about the ins and outs of the worlds of D&D with my friends and family, and I expect I will spend countless more on the subject in the future. So I thought I might as well put out a list of my personal top 10 D&D campaign settings. A quick disclaimer before we get started: there are a lot of D&D settings out there, and these are just my personal favorites. If a setting that you love isn't on the list, and I can guarantee that a few very popular ones aren't, that doesn't necessarily mean that I have anything against that setting. It only means that I enjoy the ones I chose more. My 10th favorite setting is probably the first official campaign setting that I was exposed to, and one of, if not the oldest, depending on if you count Blackmoor, which I do. But I'm of course talking about Gary Gygax's own setting of Greyhawk. Greyhawk is as classic D&D as it gets, but I have to admit that the main reason it stole my 10th place is out of nostalgia. I will always have a special place in my heart for Mordenkainen, the Eight, and the City of Greyhawk, and I will never forget the beaten old copy of my brother's Treasures of Greyhawk that served as my introduction to the official worlds of D&D. Some might find it odd, but my 9th place goes to Forgotten Realms. There are two main reasons why this beloved game world doesn't rank higher for me these days. The first is that Forgotten Realms just isn't different or unique enough from most other D&D settings. Although a very well-crafted world, it has always felt a little generic compared to some of the more fantastical ones higher on the list. I merely prefer more exotic campaign settings in general. The second reason is that as the current official base setting for Dungeons & Dragons, nearly all of the adventures released so far have been set in Faerun, and the only campaign setting book detailed the Sword Coast. Running so many games in the realms has given me a bit of Faerun fatigue. If you'd asked me 2 years ago, Forgotten Realms would easily have been higher on this list, but today I find it hard to rank it higher. Imagine a world with two opposing cultures. On one side of conflict you have a proud warrior people who despise arcane magic and value life and honor above all. On the other side, a nation of mages whose highest virtues include justice and duty. Then throw in behemoth constructs on both sides of the war, essentially magical battle mechs. Well, what you have then is Jakandor, a D&D setting that stepped away from the traditional good versus evil struggle that is common throughout D&D, and focused on a war based on cultural and ideological differences instead. It's an often overlooked campaign setting that I've wanted to run for almost exactly 20 years now. Perhaps I'll do a video on it someday. There's definitely a lot to talk about here, and I think this is one topic that not all of you have heard very much about in the past. Let me know in the comments below if you would like to know more. I've always been fascinated by the different planes of existence in D&D. The many planes along the Great Wheel are just so incredibly unique, and each offers several lifetimes worth of content to explore and enjoy, and that is why Planescape gets the 7th spot on my list. I've never actually played a native of Sigil, but I have often visited the planes for an evening or two, both as a player and as a DM. Planescape is the perfect setting if you're looking for trippy adventures, fantastical locations, and truly alien foes. My number 6 goes to a underrated setting that I would love to talk about in the future, Alkyd. Based on a mix of Middle Eastern history, tales from the Arabian Nights, and classical Hollywood movies, while still very much staying true to D&D, Alkyd is in my opinion the best of the regional campaign settings of Aber Toril. It is a setting that always sparks my imagination. One of a few times over the last few years I got a chance to play and on DM, my character was a traveler from Saqqara, the main country of the setting, and I had the pleasure of running a 5th edition game in Alkyd just last year. It's definitely a place I look forward to visiting in the future. The next spot on my list goes to one of the campaign settings I'm currently using for one of my games, Emberon. Anyone who knows me knows that I love airships. I love worlds that mix technology and magic. Emberon has that and so much more. A world of high fantasy where magic is common and nearly anything from the history of D&D can be found, but usually with a twist. The main region of Emberon is struggling with a cold war in the wake of a continent-wide conflict that raged for 100 years. Emberon is all about shades of grey in contrast to the often black and white outlooks of some of the other D&D settings, and it's often described as being a fantasy noir setting. Ever since I first read about Emberon, I thought it seemed like a pretty cool place, but I have to say that after actually running games in the world, I've found a much deeper love for the world. The more I learn about Emberon, the more interesting I find it. Do you like Arthurian legends? Do you like Game of Thrones? Do you like Highlander? What if there was a D&D setting that mixed all of that together? Well, there is, and it's Birthright. In the world of Birthright, the right to rule is literally granted by the gods and in the blood of your character. During ancient times, the gods of the world were destroyed in an epic battle. As the gods died, mortals who were on the battlefield were imbued with a part of their power. Their descendants are now the royalty and nobility of the world, and their legacy allows them to inspire and rule over the masses. Although very much a D&D game, Birthright always ran a bit as a kingdom simulator as well. The Highlander part comes in when a bloodied character kills another. They can steal some of that divine energy in their vanquished foe's blood, and empower themselves. It's a very unique world, and one I wished I owned a lot more books from. The last 3 spots on my list are all very near and dear to my heart, and constantly switch places. I've always had a hard time deciding which of these 3 I love the most, and these may very well switch places again in the future, although the current order has stuck for a while now. My current 3rd favorite D&D setting is Spelljammer. Essentially, it's D&D in space. Imagine if you could sail through space on magical sailing vessels and have fantastical swashbuckling adventures. Well, that is Spelljammer. It is a setting that has always been known for its humor, but it was always the sense of adventure and exploration that won me over. A lot of people compare it to Monty Python, but I think the closest comparison you can find to the feel of Spelljammer would be Star Trek the original series. There isn't anything quite like playing Spelljammer, and if you've never had a chance, I highly recommend that you give it a try. I don't think this next one comes to a surprise to anyone who has seen my previous videos on this channel, but my number 2 is, of course, Ravenloft, a gothic horror world practically oozing with atmosphere. I used to be a huge horror junkie, both when it comes to media and role-playing games, and I think Ravenloft was one of the things that first sparked that interest. It was probably the setting that started my interest in the many worlds of D&D as well, as it was the first campaign setting I actually bought. One of the best campaigns I ever ran was Curse of Strahd, and all the best 2nd edition games I ran were set in Ravenloft. Overall, it's a hard campaign setting to beat. And yet, I'm sure many of you watching have already figured out what my favorite setting is. It is the home of my longest running campaign, the most unique world ever created in D&D, and a place that I sometimes feel like I know as well as the back of my hand. My number 1 spot goes to Dark Sun. Dark Sun is something so unique as a post-apocalyptic fantasy world. A harsh desert world of extremes, where magic is fueled by life itself, where the only thing rarer than water is metal, and where the civilizations have been reduced to a handful of city-states. I remember sitting as a kid and looking at the old TSR catalogs, reading over the handful of short lines to describe the world and just trying to imagine how cool it would be. Once I actually got my hands on Dark Sun, it didn't disappoint. It was just like I imagined it, and I loved it from day one. Dark Sun is even the reason I got back into DMing D&D, after mostly having moved on to other games during 3.5. When I heard they were re-releasing Dark Sun for 4th edition, I just had to have it. I went out and bought those books as soon as they were released, and even though I definitely had some criticisms of 4th edition, the fact that it let me return to the barren wastes of Athos once more, well, that allowed me to forgive quite a few things. Someday I hope to tell you all about the Dark Sun campaign that I ran for years, but that is a topic for another day. I hope you liked this top 10, I will likely make a few more on other topics in the future. What are your favorite D&D settings, and how mad are you that Dragonlance didn't make the list? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed my content, then please leave a like. It really helps out a lot, and if you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon to receive notifications each time that I upload new content. If you want to support my channel, you can check out my DM's Guild products, or follow me on Twitter or Tumblr. Links to all of that in the description. Until next time, Dungeon Delvers.